Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to another edition of World Talks on TVP World, where every word matters. I'm your host, Benjamin Lee, and please join me and my guests on this next interview. Mark Rutte, former Prime Minister of the Netherlands, has taken office as the new Secretary General of NATO at a critical moment for the alliance. As the war in Ukraine nears its 1,000-day mark and defense spending looms large, Rutte is tasked with uniting NATO allies and reinforcing support for Kyiv. With a background for coalition building and transatlantic diplomacy, his leadership is expected to be crucial in navigating these challenges. Joining us today on TVP World to discuss this transition is Ian McNamara, Research Fellow at the Finnish Institute of International Affairs. Hello, sir, and welcome to TVP World.
Thank you. It's great to be on again.
So there's this saying that the NATO Secretary General is a job that gets harder and harder through each candidacy. Now, Mark Rutte is stepping into NATO as NATO's role at a very volatile time. We see more and more threats looming on the horizon and perhaps the fatigue of the war kicking in. What unique strength does he bring as Secretary General, especially considering his background in coalition politics?
Well, I think you said it there. I think the main role of the NATO Secretary General is to build consensus. NATO is always relevant, is always effective because it can build consensus among 32 neighbors, or not neighbors, rather members, between East and West, between North and South. And Mark Rutte has proven himself, as he has done, while Prime Minister of the Netherlands, to be a master at consensus building. And that's why he was selected for the job, and I think he will be a continuation Secretary General from the great consensus builder, the man who was very, very good at ironing out the creases within NATO, the outgoing Secretary General Jens Stoltenberg.
All right, there is some challenges going forward, aren't there, when it comes to the war in Ukraine? Do you think that these kind of war fatigue within the populace of these NATO allied countries, which is politics, might trickle up to affect some of the military decision and defense spending decision when it comes at a time where they're trying to, well, NATO's trying to bolster its defense spending from 2 to 3% GDP?
Yes, there's definitely war fatigue is setting in Ukraine, but resolve needs to be shown. I mean, the whole European security architecture is shattered beyond repair if Russia is allowed to meet its objectives in Ukraine. So Russia can't be allowed to win there. The consequences are dire if it does. So that is a key challenge for Mark Rutte to kind of to build this vitality, or keep the vitality within NATO and keep resolve going, and of course keep NATO prepared, because we don't know what patterns are going to come out of this war in Ukraine yet. Is Russia going to come out of it weak? Is Russia going to come out of it strong? And if Russia comes out of this war strong, then NATO's eastern flank, or maybe strong is too strong a word, but if Russia comes out of this war replenished, then NATO's eastern flank needs to be strengthened to deter any Russian aggression on the EU border, on the NATO border, over the long term. And this will, of course, mean serious defense modernization and serious security of supply replenishment as well. You mentioned ammunition there. Our ammunition stocks in Europe will have to be brought up, and that will take a lot of spending that Mark Rutte will have to oversee and persuade and coax NATO members to undertake. So these are the challenges facing Mark Rutte right now as he steps into the leadership role as the NATO Secretary General.
All right, there's something interesting that I would like to pick your brain on, because we recently are seeing that the European Union is sort of trying to have its own kind of defense entity. Where traditionally we do see NATO as the defense wing of the European Union. So how significant is NATO's need to bridge its defense coordination with the European Union? Aren't there a little bit of kind of overlapping in roles in this sense that NATO have to be able to navigate?
There are overlapping roles, of course. But I think a point we need to focus on is the European deterrence, with the Europeans doing a lot of it themselves, or European deterrence within NATO with serious US structure of power. You could use the term enablers, but I would prefer to use the term structural power. So if you ask any European military commander, any senior European general in one of the big member states of the European Union, in Poland, in Germany, in France, or in the United Kingdom, you ask, well, what's the big difference between the United States military and European militaries beyond size? And they will tell you, the ability of the US military to move, that they can move at a much faster pace than European militaries because of their technology, because of their logistics, and because of their command and control. They have very well embedded. They call it mission command, where there's a lot of cohesion and units trust their subordinates. So you don't need to be relaying things back to command all the time to get an answer. You can move forward straight away. So deterrence in Europe, deterrence for the NATO eastern flank is really built around that movement, light battle groups in the east that can be shorn up by more serious forces in the west that can be moved in rapidly using US logistics, using US command and control, and using US technology if needs be. Now, say under Donald Trump, he could paralyze all that. So we need to be thinking about doing deterrence the European way. And I think doing deterrence the European way, strategic autonomy of deterrence, if you will, I think this means more in-place deterrence along the eastern flank, more solidarity, heavier lines in terms of troops. Because, of course, Europeans, they just don't have that same capacity to move quickly that the US Colossus has.
Right, you just mentioned Donald Trump there, which might be, a wrench into the whole machine as we speak. So let's address the elephant in the room, because, some insiders credit Rutte with actually diffusing a crisis with Trump during the 2018 NATO summit. Do you think this diplomacy skill will come into play, and do you think that's one of the considerations when choosing him as the NATO Secretary General?
Yes, most certainly. A Secretary General who can bite his lip, a Secretary General who can keep his cool under pressure, and under a barrage of this firework of thoughts that we often see at summits involving Donald Trump, is very, very important. A Secretary General who can get the message across to Donald Trump that the Europeans are spending more on defense and the Europeans are doing more on defense than ever before in the post-Cold War era, so that the United States can make that balance between the European theatre and the Indo-Pacific theatre. That is crucial. But of course, we're thinking now that, or we're taking it for granted that Donald Trump will come back to power, will come back to the US presidency. But that's not a foregone conclusion if you look at the polls. I mean, it's just as likely we'll get a Kamala Harris presidency. If we get a Kamala Harris presidency, we'll see a smoother transatlantic transition. But nevertheless, even under a Democratic administration, in the next US presidential administration, the US, their primary focus is on the Indo-Pacific. It'll be smoother under Kamala Harris as they aim to balance Europe and the Indo-Pacific in the United States, but nevertheless, Europe is still secondary. So this is a clear signal to European countries, to the European Union, that Europe needs to do more for its own defence and needs to start planning more for its own defence. And as I mentioned, this mightn't be the way we've always done it. We need to maybe do things more the European way rather than the US or the transatlantic way. So European cooperation is key at this time, no matter who occupies the White House come the spring of next year.
So do you think Mark Rutte will be able to kind of balance the need for U.S. support and the strategic autonomy that Europe so desperately needs, like you mentioned?
Yes, strategic autonomy is very, very important, but it is incredibly desirable, of course, that the United States stays engaged in Europe. The United States is vital for European security. And of course, European security is vital for the United States. So, sorry, that very, very simple message is very, very important. And you know, the nitty gritty, the facts and the figures and the details of this will need to be communicated and will need to be underlined, not just in Washington, but throughout the Euro-Atlantic area. And Mark Rutte, his record as Prime Minister of the Netherlands underlines that he definitely is the right man for the job in this regard.
Brilliant. Thank you so much for your input and insight. I really appreciate it. Thanks for being with us on TVP World.
Thank you very much.
Cheers. And thank you for watching this edition of World Talks. But for more news, update, and commentary, please stay tuned to TVP World.